Welcome to this our second meeting this evening in Building D&E of the Board of Trustees. This is a budget workshop meeting to discuss a budget town hall meeting. I'm sorry, because there's a difference in the kinds of meetings we hold. This is a budget town hall meeting to discuss our 2021 budget and 2022 budget and how the certain things that have happened recently affect those budgets and how they may or may not affect our 5-year plan as we go forward and our 21-22 budget. There are a number of issues I think that we have to discuss as a board to make sure that we're all on the same page. And so with that, we'll have lengthy discussion, and to start the meeting, we would go with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Loveland, would you please lead us? Thank you. I will have Mr. Coffey do some introduction and kind of get us on the right track. But I think before we do, and I want to make sure the audience understands that this is a town hall meeting, and at a certain point, the audience will be able to have actual dialogue with the board. But in order to do that, we still will run an orderly meeting, and if you're going to have dialogue, we would ask that you stand to be recognized. Always give your name, your address, and make sure you limit your comments as much as possible. But this is a different type of meeting than a regular board meeting, special meeting, or even a workshop. With that, we have to look at things that have affected our budget recently, the COVID, what those expenses, deficits, whatever it may be. We have to look at some major projects that are upcoming that have been discussed in the past. Do we want to continue with those kinds of projects because of how what do we call it, the minimum wage and COVID, how these things will affect our budget? Do we continue the projects? Do we fund the beach project? We've already talked about that. Do we go with the lounge? Do we go with the irrigation system on the golf course? Do we go with the analyst position? Do we put more money into the neighborhood revitalization program, which I've mentioned many times, I think is very important, that allows us to, we tried last year, but do we attempt it again this year to go on the referendum ballot so we can increase that from $25,000 to $50,000. Allows us to buy some of these older homes and get new homes coming in. The first thing, and I'll ask Don to go, but the first thing I would like to discuss as we go on is that does this current board agree with what John calls the principles of operation that he put in his memo, and I call the philosophy concerning the funding of amenities in the Bay, which is, simple terms, this is not me making a point on either side, but amenities, there's certain ones do not break even, and we fund them. Certain amenities we charge fees for and still supplement them from the general fund. Certain amenities we put more in from the supplement more than the general fund and charge no fees. Sometimes we have to increase fees or costs in order to generate revenue, and questions come from community residents on both sides of this saying, why do I pay a fee when you're putting $425,000 into pools but they pay no fees, et cetera, et cetera. So the major issue that I see is I would like to have the board discuss, and I'm not sure we want to go to John first, but does this board agree or understand the concept that we operate under, which is certain amenities do not break even. We don't intend, we'd like them to break even, but we don't intend for them to break even, and we all know we're going to supplement them from the general fund. Is it possible we could throw that out for discussion first before we go actually into budget numbers? I would throw that out to the board, because I think with a new board, as we go forward, we have to make sure we're all on the same page. Mr. Loveland.
This is one of my favorite subjects. We have 3 amenities that I would consider retail or service amenities. Those amenities are golf, the lounge, and the 19th hole. Those are the 3 things where we either buy a product and resell it, or we sell a service of a product, such as golf. All other amenities are amenities that are social amenities, such as the pool, the beach, the tennis, pickleball. Those are amenities that that only have regular maintenance, such as painting or serviceable type of maintenances. The reason that the 3 amenities that I consider a retail type of amenity, that we have them, is because it does add to the bay. Golf certainly adds to the property value of the home. The lounge adds to the sociability of our members, of our residents and homeowners, as does the 19th hole. So they're all important. You're right. Should we be subsidizing them? I think that sometimes you might hear some of the golfers say, "Why are we subsidizing the lounge?" Well, why are we subsidizing golf? I mean, we're truly subsidizing because the amenity makes our home value greater. It makes life in the bay greater for all of us, whether it's through property value or whether it's through the fact that we use it or we enjoy it or we don't. There are going to be some homeowners that have bought into our community that say, "I don't use any of the amenities, so why should I pay for any of them?" And that might be a large number. But when they buy in here, they know that they're buying in what we consider a recreational district. And with that recreational district comes recreation. And there's a cost to that. There was a cost to that when you move in. You know, the district fee covers the things like the pools and the pickleball and the racquetball. But I don't think that we can compare. I don't think that we should compare amenities. I don't think we should compare golf to music at the 19th hole. Those are all amenities that were here long before we came on. But I do think that it's worth the discussion on what our pricing is for them, what our outside pricing is, what our homeowner pricing is. Should there be a discount? Should it break even? I don't think that we should look at it as, should we make a profit? Because in order to do that, I fear that we would lose all 3 amenities. I think golf would be so expensive, nobody would want to play our course. I think that the lounge would be so expensive, nobody would go to the lounge to listen to the music. So I think that when we do look at it, we can't look at it as I would say a Rosie's or an Earl's or PGA National. We can't look at it that way. We have to look. We are a community that happens to have these amenities within our community. And when we say, when we hear someone say, "Why should I subsidize that?" If they're sitting in the lounge saying, "Why should I subsidize golf?" then why should I subsidize what they're eating or drinking? And if they're on the course saying, "Why should I subsidize the music at the lounge?" then why should we subsidize golf? I think that that's a moot argument. I don't think it's one that we should even have. I don't think it's one we should engage in. But I do think that whether we meet or subsidize is an important conversation to have on all amenities.
Thank you. And to your point, I agree with a lot of your points. One of the things, and I'll go on to others, one of the things about the why, people who say, "Well, I don't use the amenities, why should I have to pay for that?" That's really not a valid argument, because when you pay taxes and you don't drive a car, you're still paying taxes to build bridges, to build roads, et cetera, et cetera. I used to run into that all the time in schools and say, "Well, I don't have kids in school, why should I pay?" Well, people do that. We pay for the betterment of everyone. I'm not saying that either way, I'm not arguing this point either way, by the way. I just want to make sure we're all clear and on board with what we're doing. One of the other arguments that I hear, one of the discussions I hear, is that, for instance, and understand, I'm just bringing these points up for discussion. These are not points I'm for or against. But as you mentioned that, so let's take the golf course. So we increase greens fees and memberships by 10%, and golfers then come up and say, "Why are we paying more when you people put $425,000 into the pools and they don't pay anything?" And again, I'm not saying we'd change that at all. I'm just simply saying that is the kind of this argument you get from certain people about things. So again, I'm simply not saying we change that. I'm simply saying make sure we understand what we do so we don't go on from this meeting later on and then say, well, I didn't know that we put $280,000 into the golf course or $60,000 into food and beverage. That is the decision we make as the board going in. So again, comments. Mr. Bruno.
I have to agree with Randy. I look at the amenities here sort of maybe in a different fashion. I look at them as labor intensive and less labor intensive. You look at the golf course, that's labor intensive. You look at 19th hole, that takes servers and cooks. You look at the lounge, takes bartenders. So somewhere along the line, those are going to be more costly operations. On the other hand, I know a lot of people that use the lounge, a lot of people that like the 19th hole, and a bunch of golfers. I think it's a delicate balance between breaking even and providing a service. I have no problems with making the 19th hole, the lounge, and the golf course like a tier 1 funding line. Break even, we'll see how much we have to subsidize. I see tier 2 maybe being the pools, the pickleball carts, all that kind of stuff, and what do we need to maintain them? And basically look at it like that. I'm on board for the run here, and I agree with you, Mike. I think we're on the right course here.
And again, understand, we do now supplement both food and beverage and the golf course, especially the golf course, anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000 a year, depending on what year we're in. And it's a known given going in. Even though we increase fees to try to help, we still do that. Anyone else, comments on this issue?
I don't see any light in the tunnel here. It's a losing proposition. It's going to be a losing proposition. Did anybody ever think in the previous board, did it ever come up to perhaps maybe getting someone in to run and just get rent for these for these places like golf course or the bar, or food, the lounge, and just charge a leasing fee, This
Try
way
to
there's
do
no,
what?
there's no out of pocket from us, and we still have the facility. If you know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about? Like somebody.
Are you suggesting to look for private companies to run these?
No, well, see if there's any interest of leasing the facilities out and getting income rather than outgoing.
Like our golf course and,
Yeah, golf course or.
well, again, if you're
19th
going
hole,
to, again, that's leaning towards saying we want to break even kind of problem, and that is not, that's the whole idea.
Well,
My
just-
input, the whole
I'm
idea
just
is that
trying-
we, up to this point, have not said those would break even.
No, I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying, has anybody ever brought that up? To lease out?
Have they?
I mean, I don't know.
That's usually brought up on an annual basis. One of the things I would suggest is before the board were to privatize food and beverage is to tell myself and Ms. Mendes, operate it how you see fit, because the reason we operate food and beverage at a subsidy is because a prior board and residents request to be open during non-profitable times and hours. There was a former trustee who insisted that the lounge be open all day in the summer in case one person wanted a draft beer to sit at the pool. We clearly can come very close, if not make a profit, but it will upset a lot of people. For example, the 19th hole probably would not serve food from May through November. The 19th hole might not even be open a majority of the days in the summertime. That will upset a lot of people. Right now, we're getting complaints that we have too limited of a menu. Their favorite items not on the menu, that we stopped serving lunch at 3 o'clock. That mission creep to make everyone happy or attempt to make everyone happy is how we've gotten to the subsidy where we're at. And the other thing is we treat our food and beverage employees like government employees. When you go to the 19th hole or the lounge on the 4th of July, the people working there are getting paid double time. You go to any other private restaurant, we have a couple in the Bay in our shopping center. I seriously doubt they're paying their people double time on the 4th of July. We give our part-time people a very small vacation benefit. If we were to operate like a business and try to make as much money as possible or not lose as much, we would probably have 2 tiers of employees, food and beverage and everybody else. That's not going to make people happy. So that's where the give and take comes into. Part of my continuing education each year, I go to a national conference, and each year I talk to some management companies just to gauge their take, if this ever were to get support. Most of the big management companies would love to come in and bid on golf and food and beverage as a package. They're not interested in doing street dances. They're not interested in having live entertainment. They're not interested in catering. They're not interested in pasta night things. They're not interested in having subsidized golf tournaments where you can play golf a tournament for less than $30. So those are all things, if we were to privatize or we were to operate like a private company, that would have a room packed full of people upset that instead of paying $30 to play in a charitable tournament, they got to pay $65 or $70.
And these are all very good points, because if you take food and beverage, understanding, again, another point about food and beverage, if we lose money in food and beverage, you can almost go right directly to the line items in the budget, looking at the summertime when we open food and 19th hole so people can have breakfast there. There may be only a few people who have breakfast, but to those people, I mean, I've heard it from so many people, that's a very, very important thing. It's their amenity. So again, our whole concept is that we are providing amenities to the people, understanding we are going to bite the bullet and we're going to supplement that from general fund. Again, we don't make motions in this meeting and ever. At some point, if we ever wanted to change that, that is something this board would have to do, literally by a motion I'm sorry, go ahead. Did you have another one, Mr. Morrissey?
No, I was just curious if that was first mentioned to me, when you walk the streets and walk the dogs, and people kind of approach you for ideas. Well, I said, just
Sure.
see if it was done. It was talked about, I don't agree with it, but,
We get a lot of, I don't mean to monopolize this, I'm just jump in and just put your I wish we all had a light. One of the things, people do, and I get a lot of this, people talk about, well, why don't we make money? Why don't we run this as a business? Our prices are too high, et cetera, et cetera. Our golf course green fees are too high, et cetera, et cetera. I went out and actually looked at the prices of drinks, the prices for a bucket of beer, the prices for 4 beers at Sebastian, at Aquarina, at Sandridge, at these different places, and we are not high. As a matter of fact, we're lower. As an example, at our golf course here in the 19th hole, and I think Kathy's in the audience, isn't she? She's somewhere back there. Yeah, I think at our 19th hole, you can get 6 16-ounce beers, and it comes out to like $2.80 a beer or something like that. You go down to Sebastian Golf Course, which I was at the other day, and it was my turn to buy, and I bought 4 beers, 4 12-ounce beers, and it came out to close to $4 a beer. We're getting 6 16-ounce beers for $2.80 a beer. It's $4. So, and you look at things and try to put it in perspective, I don't think our people at in either the food and beverage or running the golf course are doing things improper or the wrong way or not trying to make ends meet. I think they're doing a very, very good job. It's the understanding that, again, that we are going to put money from the general fund into this thing rather than making sure those beers are now going to be $4 a beer. Mr. Loveland.
Yeah, this is a great year to look at the budget and to look at these amenities. This year, we turned 50 years old. 50 years ago in March, the first homes were sold in Barefoot Bay. 50 years ago in March, our first residents moved in here. At that time, and at GAC's design, we were designed with a 9-hole golf course, the pool, the pickleball, I mean, not pickleball, but the tennis courts. We had a lot of the amenities that we have in place. We did not have a lounge. We did not have a 19th hole. Those things came at a later date. We have migrated into that. I think that we need to look at what the intent was. The intent of this community was to be at the pleasure of the residents. And I think that that is, no matter what decisions we make as a board, if we keep that in mind at all times, that 50 years ago and today are no different. We still should be operating at the pleasure of the residents. Whatever we do, wherever we move forward, it should be to make our lifestyle and our life here in the Bay as comfortable and as pleasant as possible. So, so when we look at things like, and Mr. Morrissey, I've heard that same thing of leasing out these amenities to private companies. It would be a horrible idea, and I don't think that a horrible idea in the respect that we would lose all control of our amenities, of those extra amenities. And then we would kind of have foreigners on our local ground, running the way that things are done. So, but I think that it's important that we kind of look at what the core of Barefoot Bay was about. It wasn't about being an over 55 community. It wasn't about being a retirement community. It was about being a nice, gentle community for people to come to, whether they're in retirement or working or whatever. We are here to have social, to be social, and to live like they would at Celebration City, not like they would at the villages, necessarily.
Mr. Nugent.
I would agree. I basically think that we will always have to subsidize the food and beverage, the golf course, and I think we need to take that in consideration when we're speculating on future budgets. It's going to be a given.
Thank you. Okay, that was my number one issue I wanted to bring up. So I guess I want to make sure that we're all thinking of the same way. It may not even think the same way, but make sure you understand that it is this board that sets that concept or philosophy. If it's ever going to change, it's going to be done by the current board. So we have to all understand that it's because we did something in the past does not mean we have to do it now, but you have to all agree or understand that it's up to us to change those things. So as far as I'm concerned, that we had input on that. Mr. Coffey, where do we go from here?
If you wanted to talk about any of those other issues you brought up, we could, or...
Okay, we're going to do, and again, my idea was to do all of these, bring them up, and then have audience participation, have them ask questions, do whatever, okay? Okay, the first issue we have, of course, is that we have to understand where our budget is right now. I'm talking about our 2021 budget, where we see that in simple terms, where we see that at the end of the year because of the COVID-19, how that affected the budget, because of what the, what do they call the fees, the wages, minimum wage will come to effect. And then my question would be, where are we with the fund balance at that time, and do we go ahead with major projects? So can you give us just a briefing of where we are, where we think we will be at the end of 2021 because of what's coming up? Not capital projects.
Yes.
Not capital projects.
Yeah, and that's the big, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the big variable.
Right.
Overall, our revenues are slightly down. Golf course has experienced some of our winter residents not coming back. Our operating expenditures are slightly up due to the crowd monitors and, checking temperatures and the sanitation routine that we're in. So overall, we're rather close to where we should be. The big variable is in the capital projects going forward. The minimum wage doesn't impact us in this fiscal year. It impacts us the next 6 fiscal years.
I wasn't sure if we had to change anything in minimum
No.
wage this year, not this budget, correct?
No, we're good this year. And one of the little quirks is that we had in prior years, when people would see the monies identified for employee raises, those were 9 months of employee raises. So on paper, it looks like we're going to be paying people more for the same type of raises, but because the minimum wage now resets each October 1, and we align our evaluations and annual COLA and merit with that, the people not getting the minimum wage bumps will see it'll appear to be more because it'll be 12 months. But overall, this year, we're motoring along pretty well. The issue that we talked about, the beach has the potential to have some additional costs if the variance isn't approved. But there's plenty of projects that are being held back that could offset that cost. The big gorilla in the room, or whatever the analogy is the lounge expansion and the first part of the lounge expansion and the first part of the irrigation replacement at the golf course, and the borrowing the money to fund that. And that's the big question, how we move forward. For the audience's sake, I sent a real rough analysis out to the trustees last night. The reason it's real rough is the managers are working on their FY22 budget requests, and they're due to me next Thursday. So, but assuming we would go forward with those two big projects, and they're both 2-year projects for 21 and 22, borrowing $1 million this year, borrowing $400,000 next year, having it all paid back within a 7-year period. The impact of that by FY26 is $1.5 million. If we don't do those projects and we don't borrow that money, we have $1 million roughly in fund balance at the end of FY26, where if we do try to do those projects and don't change anything else, which we wouldn't do, but for sake of argument, we would run out of money in the summer of 2026. So clearly, we can't just proceed on that way. And that is the two factors of the cap on the assessment, taking away $1.8 million from the 5 years as planned last year, and the minimal impact of the minimum wage increase being about $500,000 over the next 5 years. And that very likely, that $500,000 could morph into $1 million unless you want 85% of the employees in this organization making the same amount. And that just will not work well on retention and recruitment. So there's some big challenges facing us ahead. They're not challenges that are hitting us in the face right now, but they are issues that we need to chart a course so we're not hitting the brick wall, 3-4 years down the road.
And having said that, there are some issues that I think we have to decide whether we go ahead with. And as some of them I mentioned were the beach, the lounge project, the irrigation system, the analyst position, and whether or not we put more money into the NRP program. I'll have discussion on all of those items. I guess my opinion, I'll wait till the end to mine. Let's get comment from the board on any of these issues, major issues. Do we continue with the projects? And Mr. Gruno brought up something in saying, well, the board changes things that previous boards put in place. And that's exactly what happens when you have a 5-member board, and a majority of the board members can be elected every other year. I've talked at length that that's the wrong thing to do. It shouldn't be that way, and I'll look at that during the coming year. But for right now, things were decided. They were looked at. I confess that at some of these things, when I first got on the board, I agreed with board members simply because at that time I was trying to build a cohesiveness between board members, supporting things they wanted, and even some of the things I was not for. Some things I brought up were turned down, and I was just trying to get a good feeling for the board. But the lounge is the big one. We're talking about 750,000 plus. I think next year there's another 250 that goes into that, part of another loan. That and the irrigation system, again, we're talking about laying all new pipes, different kind of piping, but we're also talking about not redoing our greens until I believe it's 24, 26. 24, 25, 26, when we'd even attempt to do any greens. We have changed heads on the sprinkler systems on the greens. The question then is, do we want to go ahead with the entire laying all of the new pipes for that? I've heard pros and cons from a number of people. Why are we doing that? The pipes don't break. They'll last for 100 years. Mr. Coffey and I talked and discussed it, and the idea was brought up, well, even if you do it all, it's cheaper sometime to do it all at the same time, et cetera. But that's a big expense. It's a big expense this year, and it's a big expense next year. So I will just open this up to the board, comments on all of those. I think we want to talk about those three issues, and the analyst position is another one. When we discussed the analyst position here, I disagreed with the analyst position because of the time we were doing it. I just didn't think it was right. I agreed we should have the position, but I didn't agree with the timing of it. The question now is, do we add another, I don't think we have any top-notch candidates that have come forward or anything yet, but do we in fact go ahead with it, or do we say, let's hold off that $62,000 plus because of what we're looking at with next year minimum wage, the COVID finances, et cetera? So I'll open it up. Enough for me.
Well,
Mr.
I'll speak to the analyst position. I talked with John. What's your boss's name?
Jason Pierman.
Sorry, it's a senior moment. I talked to Jason Pierman, and they are actively seeking and recruiting for that position. Again, this is another going 3/4 of the way because this has been 3 years in the making. This position is beneficial because, you know, one of our largest complaints from homeowners, or at least calls that I get and have gotten for 3 years, is they have a feeling that they're not heard or that their issues aren't brought forward. And that position would definitely be a great liaison position with the 4 or 5 managers that we have between the 9,000 homeowners that we have. That position has been designed and explained and re-explained and over-explained. I will always vote for it because I just think that it's such a support to our community. It's only going to make our other staff positions even better. It's going to make us more efficient. I think it's going to surface. It will definitely bring to surface any pratfalls that we may have and give us an opportunity for early correction. But having said that, I just think that we need to look at that. As far as the other points, I fear that we're going to get into should we do the lounge, should we do the golf course, should we, and I don't want this board to become a divided board in what do we do for the lounge or what do we do for the golf course. I don't think that we will. I think that we're all pretty much on the same page. But I want to caution us on that in becoming a board of golf course or a board of lounge. And every board I've seen before us has kind of divided that way. Right. I want to caution us to not do that and to try to work through some of these things. So that business analyst was the only thing that was outside of the realm of, and I think it's the only thing outside of the realm of what we're going to discuss budget-wise, of what do we do for the lounge, 19th hole, restaurant, compared to the golf course.
And just so you know, the only reason I added that to my list of items is because a few meetings ago, we all came to consensus that, geez, we better not add anything new to the budget or anything else, new projects or whatever. Let's just hold off and wait to see where we are. I'm not against the analyst position. I am, however, in the position of saying, let's just step back a minute and see exactly where we are next year, what happens, and that was my point. Go ahead, Mr. Gruno.
Mike, what if we took the analyst position and deferred it for 6 months? Still keep it in the running, but defer the implementation of it 6 months, see where things go. I mean, that's one thing I would think of doing. But as far as the golf course, the lounge, and 19th hole and all that, with the golf course, I went out and took a tour with Ernie. They were overseeding. Some of that's come up pretty nice. I grew up on a 400-acre potato farm in southern New Jersey, so I know a little bit about irrigation. I asked the question of Ernie, why do we need irrigation, and how old is it? And he said it was like 17 or 18 years old. My first thought is, if it was plastic pipes, why does it need to be replaced? But he was telling me that they start to deteriorate. And what I will tell you about irrigation is, once one part breaks, you've lost the whole golf course. And that golf course survives on water. So I'm going to be one to say that let's at least get phase one going on irrigation. That was what the previous board wanted to do. Let's stay the course with that one. The lounge, man, that lounge has been 4 years going. Everything from rehab to scrape down to enlarge. We have plans for enlarging it. Again, we're halfway to Disney World. Let's get moving on that. As far as borrowing money, money is cheap now. If we borrow money now, we'll save money because of the construction costs are going to go up higher than the rate of borrowing. So I think the borrowing to get it done is a good thing. And whatever happens with the beach, we might have to do a little carving, but I think the beach stays as a priority from the previous board.
Yes, Mr. Nugent.
And I would tend to agree. I think we need to invest in our amenities. By doing that, it keeps the values of our homes up there. I'm not necessarily a lounge user, but if we need to improve upon it, I think we need to improve upon it. Same with doing anything at the golf course. I'm not a golfer, but yet to maintain a good golf course, you have to have water. And so I think the system of gradual implementation of replacing the irrigation to the golf course, I think that's important.
Mr. Morrissey.
I agree with everybody right now. Everything is, especially the things that board had passed last year and for years ago, it's still not completed. I think this is the best time to do it. Like, you know, our trustees on my left and my right, I agree with you 100%. I think we should just try to maintain and get a loan at the best rates and try to finish the things we're trying to finish, you know, in the past, especially the last few years. The beach and the golf course, things like that, they need to be updated. They need to be, you know, maintained. And it costs money. It's nothing's free in this life, you know, somewhere or another. But I think that it sounds like we're all in the same agreement of getting things done and cleaning up the stuff that was left behind. I think that's the way I look at it. If it was past boards and not completed, I think this is the best time to do that with the money, lending money, you know, borrowing money, I should say, is at the lowest I've ever seen. I think at the long run, I think that it'll be all beneficial to us. It'll enhance the property value, you know, and everybody will be happy and enjoy what we're supposed to do in paradise, a little bit of paradise that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you. We're actually not all in agreement because
Oh, sorry
I
about that.
disagree.
I thought I heard that.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I do not disagree with the plans and the process. We started the lounge and looked at it. I have nothing, even though I'm a golfer and people think I represent the golf course, I really don't. I look at the irrigation system. I look at taking a loan for $1 million this year and a loan for $400,000. I think it's 400 next year. A loan for $400,000 next year. With the unknowns we have, those are the only reasons why I have objections to what we're looking to do and getting this big $1 million loan and a $400,000 loan next year. I'm not against any of these projects, but you know, I hate to refer back to what I used to do, but I ran so many budgets and you had to look at these millions of dollars, and I just I think there are unknowns out there that we've been talking about this lounge, for instance, as you said, for many years. They were going to build the Taj Mahal at one time, then they reduced it, then we're going to put a canopy up, and we're going to do all kinds of things. I'm not saying, I know that's important to people, but at this time, especially with the minimum wage and how that's going to affect our employees in the coming years, I just hesitate to look at going ahead with those things right now. So I understand your point, and we do with the board, consensus of the board, but my feeling is that I would rather be holding off on these things until we actually, I had a resident tell me the other day, when the minimum wage goes in, you people are going to be raising our assessments up. Well, we only can raise assessments like about $12 a year, I believe, right, John? It's going to be $12 a year. We're not going to make much money raising assessments. And so, again, we have unknowns out there. Do we jump in and go for $1 million and $1.4 million loans when we have unknowns? And that's my point. I'm not against any of those projects, any of them.
Can I ask a question? And that is, in our current status in the lounge and the current status of the irrigation system on the golf course, can that be postponed for a while?
If you want to speak specific about each one, probably defer that answer to the managers. Of course, it can always be deferred. The issue at the lounge is the concept of the project. Once prior board understood we didn't have parking capacity to scrape and rebuild something much larger, was to try to have a more all-weather environment to where when we have light rain or something, everybody doesn't scatter and the day's over. And so that was the concept of the big wraparound canopy, and also trying to have a more resident-friendly environment instead of having pockets of where people could be. The golf course, you can defer that indefinitely, and you'll see the repairs just incrementally creep up. Sort of like the irrigation system is akin to a used car. Some people can tolerate pouring money into repairs. Other people like the reliability of a newer vehicle. And there's no right or wrong answer. Ernie and ABM can keep that system going. One of the issues that I think gets sidetracked from the concept of replacing the pipe is the location and design of the heads. There's, Mr. Mino can attest that there's some greens where part of the green gets hit by 3 heads and one part gets hit by 1 head. The new design is a custom design to the way the course is right now. That course has been changed incrementally over the last 40 years to where it doesn't really resemble what the course was when it first came here. But it can be deferred. Part of the issue, and I'm not going to be negative or positive about any projects, because whether we do a project or not is the community value as expressed through their represented elected leadership of the board. But if we proceed with those 2 large projects with the assumption we're going to finish each of them next year, we will have major impacts in the out years of virtually no projects. We will have to be doing something about personnel cuts, of either cutting staff or cutting back on benefits, no raises. There's the current 5-year plan that we have in the budget y'all have is very front-loaded. And so if we take money out through the whole 5 years and we're adding money in for the minimum wage, there will be very difficult decisions down the road. It's doable. Anything's doable. And but I'm just saying is that if we proceed with those projects, we need to know that tonight, because in addition to issuing RFPs, which have a 60 to 90 day turnaround until you choose a vendor, we will need to bring back proposals from the bond people to do the validation and run those concurrently. And I'm probably speaking out of order here, Cliff, but I'm not sure there's 100% certainty that we'll get the validation in time, because Cliff can speak to there's an appeal potential. So it's not 100% certain that we can execute this in a timely manner, but we can't wait until March to decide to proceed with the lounge project if we want to try to salvage the winter season next year. Because that lounge project, for folks who are new to the community, the first phase is all exterior outside the building work. So the whole backside of the lounge is a construction zone. And we want to try to get that done as quickly in the year as possible, not lose the winter season next year.
So Mr. Coffey, say it again. If we go ahead with the lounge and the irrigation system and we get the loan, $1 million this year, $400,000 next year, tell me again, how does that affect our budget next year? What does that affect?
It's not next year that is so much the problem. If you think about, most folks know my wife's from East Tennessee, and when you start going up a steep hill, the first couple miles isn't bad because it's not a straight vertical climb. But the higher you get in the mountains, the higher the grade is. And that's the financial problem that we're looking at is the first few years the impact is not that great, because if you think of the minimum wage, each year there's a marginal cost to bring employees up. If you think of in FY22, for simplistic purposes, 10 employees get $1 an hour increase. In 23, there's 10 more employees, but those first 10 also get it, so there's 20. The third year, and we get to the point where the last year, 60-70% of our employees are getting $1 an hour increase. And that's where the problem becomes in the out years. And that's where we get into the issue of we can strip out all future projects, we can cut back and defer, we can go from like a 10-year replacement plan on our vehicles to try to stretch them out. But I do not see the easy way of continuing our compensation plan the way it is and continuing to address repair and maintenance issues and do these big projects.
So this is because the minimum wage is going to impact us, but it's then because of the difficulty we will have repaying the loans?
Because the assessment cap.
Because of the assessment was lowered also.
Yeah, the assessment cap is going to take approximately $1.9 million off of the next 5 years. The minimum wage will add $500,000 to $1 million or more. And we have a $6.5–7 million budget. So you can start to see how those two numbers compound each other. And, we can work up the plan however your priorities are. And if you want to do those two big projects, I will bring you back as quickly as possible, more closer numbers so you understand where we're going. And worst case scenario, we could pursue validation. I think we have to pay up front this year for the cost because of the small nature of the loans compared to large 30-year bonds. And we can put the RFP out, and you can decide in March or April not to proceed. So it's not like tonight you're committing yourself to doing these. But what we do need tonight is an indication you're interested, because we can't wait until March or April to say we want to do the lounge project. The golf project, there's more flexibility because Ernie has talked to some of the potential bidders, and they've basically said, if we would tolerate an August or September, early October project, that they probably could have a much lower price because everybody wants their projects done early in the summer. But the lounge project is probably a 6 to 8 month project that we've got to start early in the spring if we have any hope of saving next winter.
But both of them still involve going for the loan,
Yes.
and as soon as we can. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move forward. I know you're concerned 5 years out, but the lounge is an amenity a lot of people use. We already have a crippling effect from Building A not being completed over the winter. The club's lost out on fun making. Losing A, even though I think it's going to be fabulous when that commercial kitchen gets in there, I would like to go and move forward, get the validation, and try to salvage the season for the lounge next year.
Mr. Nugent, go ahead.
A question, and that is, John, during our budget preparation, do we have a contingency, a reserve account for unplanned emergencies?
Yeah, the last few years, we factored in about 100,000 contingency for projects each year.
Okay, and is that sufficient?
Typically, it has been. I know it upsets some folks that some projects get delayed. Sometimes it's, board priorities changing. COVID really messed up a lot of things this last year. But typically, there's flexibility in the budget.
Do we want to go to audience participation and comments, or, yeah, I mean, just get some other thoughts on this? I think we'll do that. We'll open this up to audience participation. Again, we ask you to try to limit it to 3 minutes. Come up and introduce yourself and give us your name and address, please. We have one, I'm sorry. We do have a letter, first of all, and we have some phone calls we're going to make. One call. So we do the letter first or the phone call? Oh, we don't have a letter, just a phone call. Okay.
Mr. Hunter, you're on speakerphone with the Board of Trustees under audience participation. Please state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay. I'll try to stay those 3 minutes, John. Thanks for calling. Kevin Hunter, 373 Marlin Circle. And I was trying to take in everything that you guys were just discussing. And what struck me, John, most actually, was I'm glad you're sitting there. As a board member, as I mentioned earlier tonight, I thanked all of them for their service, but to be able to have you there with your knowledge and your common sense and your hard work ethic and your concern for the community, I would be very grateful to, as a board member, to have you seated there. What I wanted to say, and I don't know which direction you guys need to go on the loan, but what I wanted to comment on tonight was, again, regarding the beach. And I thought Randy summarized it pretty well earlier in the workshop meeting, in that I think that it needs to be one project. There was some concerns that came up about the beach security. And so being able to look at that, the beach and both the restroom and then also the electronic key entry, I think combining that in a way and looking at it as one project going forward would be a great way to look at that project. If we're going to have a nice restroom, that was a popular place this past spring. I mean, we were the surf capital of the world. No other beaches were accessible. People could park right outside, walk in. I mean, I saw more surfing last spring than I've ever seen. And we put nice restrooms there. Those are going to be popular too. And we just need to have these amenities for the residents of Barefoot Bay. And in the meantime, if you can possibly think of some signage to put up there to let people know that is private property. You know, them walking across those grounds is, in essence, I guess, trespassing. You know, the beach isn't, of course, and we would welcome anybody walking down the beach, you know, in that area, because we don't own that, but we do own the rest of that property. So just looking at maybe securing it in the meantime before something happens with some signage that lets people know that it is for the residents of Barefoot Bay. Thanks for calling me, and that's really all I have to say tonight, and good luck with these decisions you guys have to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one note here from Mr. Reddy, wants to speak. Oh, I'm sorry, are you going to speak? Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Nancy Isley, Barefoot Boulevard. There's two things I want to talk on. First of all, I would like to swim every day, and I can't do that in Barefoot Bay at this time. It's too cold now. In the summertime, sometimes we get rains, especially in the afternoon. We have to be conscious of the sun and our skin, and then we have thunderstorms and rain. So I'm just saying I would like to be able to swim at least 3 or 4 days a week. Number 2 is on borrowing the money. I'm against borrowing money, except right now is the time to borrow it, because you're going to be saving an awful lot of money, especially with such a high amount with the low interest rates. So I'm in favor of borrowing it now. Thank you.
Mr. Reddy.
Get rid of the Zorro mask. Jack Reddy, 806 Tamarind Circle. My concerns, looking at our budget situation for this year and the next, is this year we got a $2 raise, which equates to about $115,000 coming in. According to the government, the Reddy household got 1.3% on our Social Security. If Barefoot Bay gets the same, that comes out to 88 cents a month. And that's a shortfall from about $115,000 down to $53,000. I'm afraid or concerned that we are walking into a debt situation because of this Tobiah rule. And I don't know that we have any options to get around that, but I would urge caution on what we are spending on the projects. Now, a peak of the week way back in December said we had the finest golf course next to Augusta. I'm paraphrasing. If that's the case, can we skip the golf course for a year or so until we get ourselves financially well? We have no club activity this year in Building A, so that has reduced our food and beverage income. If 021 and 022 are the slim years, then I think this board should look at them as slim years and control our spending. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Sure, come up, introduce yourself, name and address.
Hi, I'm Angel. I live on Papaya Circle. As Randy said, 50 years ago we welcomed our first resident to Barefoot Bay. And we wanted to make this a friendly, wonderful place for all the residents here, with all the amenities for all the residents. In Barefoot Bay, we have approximately 1,600 dogs. Yes, I'm talking about a dog park. And the national average for dog ownership is 33% of a community. We have over 5,000 residents in a community, which comes down to approximately 1,600 dogs. I proposed earlier last year about a dog park that would cost us anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500 to use an existing area to put up additional fencing without permits and what have you. It was not a huge area, but it would definitely work for our bay and the dog owners here. Now that got nixed, now we're looking at somewhere between 10,000 upwards of 20,000, depending on how glamorous you want to get with a dog park. Pelock Dog Park, there are 2 in Melbourne because it is such a community asset. It's an asset to Barefoot Bay to look at having a dog park put in. This attracts new buyers. Many folks have questioned myself, as I am president of the Barefoot Bay Dog Lovers Pack, why we don't have a dog park. And they were surprised to find that we don't. Dog parks are not smelly. We police each other. We pick up after our own dog's mess. They're not loud, and they're not dangerous areas. There's many legalities that I looked into when I made that proposal, as well as liability and what have you. We're talking about $1,400,000 that we're going to borrow, or perhaps borrow over the next 2 years. Perhaps we could carve out a little area for those of residents who own dogs, who love their dogs, and who would love to have a dog park. Thank you for letting me take the time.
Thank you. Anyone else, public comment, questions? And I would remind the board that this is a town hall meeting, so you can respond to people, you can ask questions, you can have a dialogue during a town hall. Any other public comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Gruno.
Can we put the dog park on that workshop that's coming up?
I'm sorry?
Put the dog park on that workshop, the agenda workshop?
Mr. Coffey, we've got, what, 4 or 5 items on there now?
Or add it to the next one?
Are we getting paid by the hour?
No, piecework.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Are you talking on the budget agenda or on the
No,
budget
we're talking
workshop?
about the workshop we have coming up on the 9th.
It's not an issue for staff because we average about once every year and a half, and we'll just recycle what we had last year
On the,
on the dog park.
yeah,
Part of the issue is location,
right.
because there's not a place with parking that is not in front of somebody's house.
And again, the dog park, I didn't, I was not, one of the things I told Mr. Coffey a year ago was when I got on the board, I first got on the board, we sat here and it kind of seemed to me like we were trying to think of all the ways we could spend money and build things and put something in and something new and let's do this and let's buy that and let's put this in. And it was just odd to me from all my experience. So it was something to get used to. When you talk about the dog park, and I was not here during the discussions you had the last time, I was fly fishing, I believe. But as you look at the input that I even received about the dog park at the time, my goodness, there was so many people for and there were so many people against the dog park. It is a hot issue. It's not something I don't think you're going to really solve in one meeting, but we can sure put it on there. One of the other things is we talked a few meetings ago, again, we mostly about this year, I think Mr. Loveland talked about, of not putting anything new on that we'd have to spend money on this year because of the unknowns we had coming up. So we sure can put it on the agenda and a workshop and discuss it. That's fine.
Well, I guess my concern has always been, I probably have watched every board meeting since I've been here, and I've watched the audience participation, but then it seems to die at the podium. It doesn't seem to go anywhere. And so I would like to maybe be the champion of trying to get some of that stuff on the agenda so at least it gets a second look.
Other comments, questions, opinions?
I just have a comment. I will say that I'm going to follow the Jack Ready rule at least for the first few months into this year. I'm gonna sit very conservative on our spending and the way that we do it. I think of any year of the 3 years now, of any year that I've sat here, I think that this has to be the year that we are the most hawkish on our budget. So I think that it does have to make sense. I think that, we've got to do what makes absolute total sense. there's two things that concern me that I hear when John says it of running out of money in 2026. That's definitely just rattles in my head. The other thing is, I hear people say, well, we've had a year of COVID. I think it's important that we understand that COVID did not, for the majority of our income in the Bay, COVID didn't really have an effect on us. And it didn't have an effect on us because the majority of the income in our Bay that sets our budget is our district fees. And those are paid no matter what, like taxes or anything else. So what it did have an effect on is it had an effect on the staff. We had to release a lot of staff and try to bring them back. It had an effect on our golf. It had an effect on our lounge. It didn't have an effect on our pool so much outside of we closed it for a period of time, but it was a least closed thing. Had no effect on our other amenities such as the beach or such as the tennis courts or any of that. So when we look at our budget, I think it's important that we look at the income didn't change, but what is going to change, and I think what is important to look at, is this new minimum wage. That is definitely having a huge impact. The 1.3 limit that we have on CPI and our ability to raise any fees, which I don't think it's such a good idea to necessarily raise fees this year anyway, because COVID did have a lot of impact on a lot of people in the Bay. And I think that I'm just giving kind of a fair warning on that I'm going to sit in a very conservative position as we proceed forward with the budget.
Mr. Loveland, part of why I mentioned COVID when I talk about the minimum wage and others, because it did, you're right, it didn't affect our income as much as it affected our expenditures, because we tried to take care of our staff. Every time there was a breakout, we sent the staff home. We end up paying them until they get tested. And as Mr. Coffey said, it's not a great deal, but it does affect our expenditure part. If you're paying those staff to stay at home and you're closing things down, and we gave them a little bonus or whatever you want to call it at the beginning of this thing, we had no income coming in at the time. And so from the amenities, that kind of income. So that's the only reason I linked them together.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Mr. Chairman. If history's taught me anything, it's in these meetings, what we say in these meetings somehow gets out into the community a far different story. And I just want to make sure that whatever we say in these meetings, we're real clear, and being real clear on we did not lose income. I felt was important to bring up.
So let's give direction. Let's give a consensus of the board at this time, because we don't make motions tonight, correct? So let's make sure we give a consensus of this board. Let's take the two items, the lounge and the irrigation system. Are we telling the administration that we are going to go ahead and get the loans and go with these projects?
I'd like to champion that.
Mr. Loveland.
I am not for that at this point. I don't have enough information to be for that.
Mr. Morrissey. This is not a motion, it's not, but I'm just asking your opinion. You got to put your mic on.
Sorry. I would like to have more information before I make a yea or nay on the loan. It's a
Mr.
little
Nugent.
gray area here.
Yeah. Mr. Nugent.
I'm not in favor of borrowing the money.
You got to put your
I'm not in favor of borrowing the money. I get concerned as we go out the 5 years that we're going to have shortfalls.
Again, I want to make sure people understand that I also am not against any of these projects, but I am leery of going forward at this particular time, because I spent a lot of time going over this budget and where we're going to be in a couple of years, and I'm not in favor of going ahead and do that right now. So, with that, where do we go?
Well, I would like for more information to be brought back to us. I don't think that conversation is closed on it.
No.
But I would like to have more information on interest rate. I think Charles can probably provide a lot of information to us. interest rate right now? What would a loan look like? I would also like to, if we had to pare down one of the projects, whether that be the golf course or whether that be the lounge, is there a possibility of paring it down yet still moving forward? You know, maybe we don't have all the bar stools yet, or maybe we don't have all the irrigation yet. You know, there's got to be more than, it can't be just that black and white. I think that there's some gray area that we can look at. What can we live with budget-wise? Also, in this town hall, you know, I'm a little disappointed that homeowners haven't brought forward even more ideas, because this is really the place that we throw these ideas on the 5-year plan, not just on today's budget or today's environment. Thank you, Jeff, for putting the dog park back on. I think that it's something that we've got homeowners that want us to look at it. We need to look at it. We have that obligation. But I think that there's, you know, this is the dream meeting. This is usually the one where John is out there like Vanna White with a microphone. And I miss that, John, just so you know. Going to homeowners and getting their ideas of what they would like to see now and in the future. And I realize that this last year has been kind of a dead year for us, and it's, you know, it's been a really unfortunate year. So that might be why we're feeling a little sluggish and getting this town hall started.
So, Mr. Coffey, do we have direction or do we need something else? Talking about the two major issues.
Yeah. The golf course project, I'm not sure how much more you could split it up, you know, because ideally you do the irrigation all at once, and we're already, you know, splitting it in half. I'm not sure how to pare down phase one of the Lakeside project without kicking almost completed plans back into a redesign cycle that will take us outside of the construction window. What we can, you know, the biggest issue, there's a possibility of doing half of the irrigation without a loan. There's no, in my opinion, there's no easy way of doing the lounge project, phase one, without the loan. Yes, Charles could get some preliminary bank numbers, but the most important part would to be starting the validation process, because maybe this is the time Mr. Reppinger would like to review that for folks new to our gatherings. But you can like the bank loan terms all you want, but you've got to wait for the validation process to play out. So if we don't start the validation process, which is not something that's going to be free for this, we're going to be outside of the window again. And trust me, I get a phone call just about every day about the status of Building A. You may have to buy me body armor if we're having the lounge shut down next winter because we start this project late in the year. Because I don't think the folks would be happy losing next winter when we've lost this winter, basically. Cliff, can you summarize briefly anticipated timelines for validation?
The initial time frames, and again, bond counsel is probably a better predictor of what that time schedule looks like. I think when we revisited this issue, and just so everyone is clear, when we go out, whether it's bond issuance or loan, bond counsel has opined that we need to validate, and so it's basically a court proceeding that we file. There's a series of motions and procedural things that the board needs to do, and then we go into court, and typically it's outside bond counsel will begin a validation process. That process, I think, as a general guideline, probably will run you somewhere in the initial phases, probably somewhere in a 3-month to 6-month time frame as a good guesstimate, depending on how quickly they file the suit, and then that kicks you into a possible appellate time frame. which you can't control whether there's any kind of objections or appeals or anything like that. So, I mean, that's kind of a guideline of a 3 to 6 month time frame. Of course, obviously, the courts are a little bit slower now than they were the last time we visited this issue. So that also kind of controls it. I mean, court hearings right now are being set literally like 2 to 3, if not more, months out from request of notices of hearing. So it's hard to get hearing time right now, and that validation process requires a court hearing to be had. So I mean, that's about the time frame, assuming you don't have any major hiccups.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I believe John said that the irrigation people might be real happy working towards the end of the year, October-ish. So just so that we have something to work on, I would suggest that we postpone the irrigation at this point, and because Cliff's validation process is so time sensitive, we at least get that started. We can decide on the loan later on. But if we don't start now, we're not going to get it done. And that's the other fatal thing that's happened around here over the last couple of years. We don't start. When we do start, then I think we just have to be bold and move forward.
Are you saying start the validation process? Yeah.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
I wouldn't either. I wouldn't disagree with starting the validation process. I wouldn't. Again, I keep saying it. I'm not against either one of these projects. As a matter of fact, you all know, a year ago I tried to get 4 greens replaced here and irrigation, et cetera, et cetera. But you do have to understand also that we need the irrigation system. There's no question we do. But it's not broken. It's not falling apart right now. We don't have a lot of leaks every day in the fairways, that kind of thing. We had problems with the heads. We had problems with the system we had with the boxes, and we changed those. We replaced those things. They're doing a much, much better job now, more efficient. It still doesn't change some of the greens we have no matter what we do. And that's, it's just that we have a better system now. They can control it. They can do things. So it's not like we're letting our golf course go if we don't do the lines right now and do all that irrigation. We haven't changed any greens. We're not changing any greens for a couple of years. And so the irrigation system is functioning now. We're getting our greens back. We're getting the watering. I'm in favor of doing that. But again, does it have to be done right now? I think we could wait a bit.
Well, we would say triage to yellow.
I'm sorry?
Triage to yellow. Yeah. Let it sit for a little while.
So where are we now?
I can work with Mr. Reppinger to try to get you a proposal for validation, and I will contact the engineering firm to let them know that the board is interested in issuing the RFP as soon as possible, and once we get the plans from them, we can issue the RFP concurrently, which still doesn't lock you into doing anything, but it would move the process along.
Other comments? Other comments from the audience? Anything? Do we have to go and discuss some other issues yet tonight, or? I mean, we're not really into changing the budget, setting budget. We're not looking at any of that.
Those two intertwined things
Right.
are the most pressing.
Right. If not, any other comments? Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Meeting's adjourned. Oh, I get my hammer. Joe gave me the hammer.